Paze checkout is offered by your banks and credit unions. So when you shop online at participating merchants, your cards appear in one place. Paze. It checks out. Activation required. See paze.com to learn more. Terms and conditions apply.
With the all-new Dynasty Blueprint in EA Sports College Football 27, you can build your program by earning Dynasty points to spend on NIL, staff, and more. But the fun doesn't end at graduation. With the EA Sports MVP Bundle, get College Football 27, Madden NFL 27, plus Deluxe Edition rewards in both games. Make your rise with the MVP Bundle. Available now at EA.com. Rated E for everyone with mild lyrics, easier interact, and in-game purchases. Includes random items. Conditions and restrictions apply. See the link for more info.
So, what could a 23-day hunger strike in Delhi, a 19 times financial leverage strategy, and, of all things, the microscopic survival tactics of yeast cells possibly have in common? Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you. Yeah, today our mission is to cut through this massive stack of 14 distinct news sources, all from July 21st, 2026.
Right, and it's a really wide variety of stuff today.
It really is. We are looking at everything from, domestic political turmoil to global missile strikes, and then jumping over to cutting-edge finance and cellular biology.
Which sounds completely disconnected.
Exactly. They sound like entirely separate worlds. But if you look closely at the mechanics, they're actually all telling the exact same story.
Yeah, it's this fascinating story of how complex systems, whether we're talking about a nation state, a financial institution, or just a living organism, how they deal with intense, unrelenting pressure.
Because right now, if you look at the reports coming out of India's education and political systems, that pressure is just absolutely palpable.
Oh, totally. Let's start with the Cockroach Janta Party, or the CJP. They just led this massive march to parliament.
Right, demanding the resignation of the Union Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan.
Exactly. And this is all over the ongoing NEET exam leaks. I mean, if you think about the NEET exam, millions of students are funneling their entire futures through this single bottleneck.
Yeah, the stakes are incredibly high.
So when that system loses its integrity through leaks, the pent-up frustration is just enormous. But this march didn't just stay a peaceful protest. It descended into severe, violent clashes.
Yeah, the reports on this are pretty intense.
They really are. We're talking heavy barricading, lethal charges, tear gas. The numbers are staggering. 118 injured police personnel, 60 injured marchers, and 70 detentions.
Right. And I think when we're analyzing a conflict of this magnitude, it's crucial to look at the mechanics of the opposing narratives. You have the protesters who are arguing that the state used excessive, brutal force to silence students who were just legitimately fighting for their academic futures.
Right, exactly. And, before we go further, just to be very clear for our listeners, as we examine these events, we are looking at them strictly from an analytical perspective.
Yes, absolutely. We aren't taking sides or endorsing any viewpoint here.
Right. We're simply mapping out the facts and claims on the ground to understand the system. Because the state's response, specifically from the ruling party, frames the mechanics of this violence completely differently.
They do. BJP functionary Amit Malviya has publicly claimed this was, quote, orchestrated violence.
Yeah, he argues this wasn't spontaneous student rage at all. He's saying it was a deliberate, coordinated effort instigated by left-affiliated student groups like ASA and SFI.
And his claim is that the real organizers stayed comfortably out of harm's way, leaving regular participants on the front lines to face the physical and legal consequences.
It's a heavy accusation. And while those violent clashes were unfolding, a very different internal kind of physical pressure was playing out nearby.
Oh, you mean the ISA hunger strike at Jantar Mantar?
Yes, it just concluded after 23 days. Activists like Neha, Amina Mataj, and Manish Kumar, they literally turned their own bodies into a site of protest.
The biological reality of a 23-day hunger strike is just terrifying.
It is. I mean, they lost 12% of their body mass.
Wow. 12%.
Yeah, and to understand why that matters, at that stage, your body isn't just burning fat anymore. It is actively cannibalizing its own muscle tissue and stressing major organ systems just to keep the brain functioning.
That is extreme.
Right. And when they finally broke their fast, volunteer doctors had to step in with incredibly specific, carefully calculated meal plans to prevent something called refeeding syndrome.
Oh, right, because if you introduce a normal amount of food too quickly to a starved system, the sudden influx of glucose triggers a massive insulin spike.
Exactly.
And that spike pulls critical electrolytes out of the bloodstream and into the cells so fast that it can literally cause cardiac arrest. It's a highly delicate, dangerous physiological state.
It really is. And yet, even as they entered medical care, the activists vowed to pivot to entirely new forms of protest.
Which just shows the level of dedication. But this intense street-level pressure, it inevitably forces a reaction from the state machinery, right?
Yeah, a system under threat naturally tries to contain the threat. We see Mumbai police preemptively imposing Section 144, which bans gatherings of 5 or more people, all the way until August 6th.
And they explicitly cited apprehensions of disturbances linked to these very CJP protests, didn't they?
They did, yeah. It's the administrative equivalent of clamping down the lid on a boiling pot.
That's a great analogy.
And we see this legal and administrative tension culminating in the situation with climate activist Sonam Wangchuk. He was removed from Jantar Mantar and is currently being held in Safdarjung Hospital.
And this is where the legal mechanics get really interesting. He is being held there against the express wishes of his wife, Gitanjali Angmo.
Wait, really? So the state is just overriding the family?
Well, they're utilizing a legal argument of duty. They claim they have an absolute obligation to prevent his health from deteriorating to a point that it might trigger a broader law and order crisis.
But what does his legal team say?
They are arguing the exact opposite. They state he is fully conscious, not in a critical emergency state, and that the hospital is essentially being used as a makeshift detention center under the guise of paternalistic medical care.
Wow. So it's basically medical custody.
Exactly. And it's escalated to the point where the Delhi High Court has had to intervene. They are currently demanding his full, comprehensive medical records from multiple hospitals.
Just to determine if he's actually fit to be moved.
Right, to see if he's medically fit to be transferred to a facility of his family's choosing.
So if you think about all of this structurally, in a functioning democracy, the legislative branch, the parliament, is designed to be the release valve, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Societal pressure builds up, and it's supposed to vent safely through legislative debate, compromise new laws. But what happens when that valve gets jammed?
Well, that is precisely what we are seeing right now. The monsoon session of Parliament just opened, and day one was an absolute washout.
Right. 6 major interruptions, repeated adjournments. The opposition was storming the well over the NEET leaks.
But it wasn't just the opposition versus the government.
No, you had shifting political alliances causing total gridlock. Like, the DMK broke ranks with the Congress to protest entirely different regional issues.
So the legislative release valve is completely jammed by these internal disruptions.
Exactly. The pressure has nowhere to go, so it vents directly onto the streets through the CJP clashes and the...
A burst pipe. A dead water heater. The AC calling it quits. Who do you call? HomeServe is an easy way to handle unexpected home repairs with plans covering stuff basic homeowners insurance usually won't. Instead of scrambling for a contractor, you make one call to get the repair process started. Join the millions of customers who trust HomeServe right now. Go to homeserve.com/podcast for 50% less your first year. That's homeserve.com/podcast. Savings compared to renewal price void in Florida.
As a hunger strikes.
And the state, unable to process the pressure legislatively, tries to force the lid shut with administrative weights. Section 144, forced medical custody.
It's a textbook example of systemic gridlock.
Yeah.
But what's truly fascinating is that this demand for accountability, this intense societal stress, it isn't confined to the education sector or street protests.
Not at all. If you look at our sources, this exact same demand for transparency is aggressively expanding into the financial structures of India's most powerful religious and public institutions.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is right in the middle of this. They are currently weighing whether to mandate a special investigation team, an SIT, to probe alleged embezzlement of donations made to the Ram Temple Trust.
And we are talking about vast quantities of gold, silver, and cash given by devotees.
Right. Huge amounts of wealth.
And you can see the Supreme Court trying to walk a very fine, precarious line here. The Chief Justice openly acknowledged the absolute necessity for proper forensic accounting of public donations.
Sure, which makes sense.
But he also cautioned that publicly listing every single donated item or financial record might inadvertently give bad actors the ammunition to file frivolous, false claims just to harass the trust.
Oh, I see.
So they're trying to balance the need for rigorous financial transparency against the risk of the legal system being weaponized.
That is a tough balance. And once again, just keeping our analytical distance here, we aren't evaluating the truth of these deeply sensitive religious or political allegations.
Exactly. We are strictly neutrally reporting on the petitions.
Right. What is important for us today is the trend. because we see the exact same mechanism playing out in Karnataka, but this time targeting corporate funds.
Yeah, Karnataka Congress President B.K. Hariprasad is launching a major public inquiry into the state-owned Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, or ONGC.
And what's the specific allegation there?
He is citing reports that ONGC channeled 668 crore rupees in corporate social responsibility CSR funds to 20 organizations linked to the RSS over the past decade.
That is a massive sum of money.
It is. And his central argument is structural. He's saying that if an unregistered organization like the RSS, which publicly maintains that it does not take direct government funding, is somehow the beneficiary of massive amounts of taxpayer-backed corporate funds,
Then the public has a right to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He argues the public has a fundamental right to audit that money flow. And again, we're not endorsing his viewpoint, just explaining the structural demand being made.
Absolutely. So when you look at the Ram Temple petition and the ONGC allegations side by side, a really profound shift in civic behavior emerges.
Yeah, Indian citizens and their representatives are increasingly unwilling to accept institutional opacity.
It doesn't matter if the money is a sacred donation to a revered temple or a public CSR fund managed by a massive corporation. The demand for forensic accounting is becoming absolute.
Right. So internally, the country is wrestling with massive demands for transparency, systemic gridlock, and protests. But external reality doesn't just pause for internal debates.
No, it definitely doesn't.
While all of this domestic pressure is building, Indian citizens are finding themselves physically caught in the crossfire of massive global shocks.
And the human cost of that is staggering. Our sources confirm that 4 Indian seafarers were just killed and 1 critically injured in a Russian missile strike on a cargo ship near Odessa, Ukraine.
That is awful. And that tragedy brings the total Indian death toll in the Russia-Ukraine conflict to 53.
Yeah. Now, earlier casualties were primarily individuals who had been recruited as support staff for the Russian military, but these were civilian mariners.
They were just working on a grain ship.
Right. And unfortunately, the global map is lighting up elsewhere, too. The reports detail rapidly escalating tensions in the Middle East.
Yeah, President Donald Trump just ordered U.S. strikes on Iran in direct retaliation for the deaths of U.S. soldiers in Jordan and Iraq.
And Iran's leadership is now characterizing the situation as a, quote, full-scale war.
Which is terrifying. And this kind of escalation in the Middle East historically presents a severe danger to the massive Indian diaspora and the maritime workers operating in those shipping lanes.
Yeah, we've already seen 14 Indian civilians lose their lives in the Iran-Israel-U.S. conflict just this year.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to stop here, because the next item in our stack of sources is about a private Indian company unveiling a new missile engine.
Yes, the Yantur engine.
Right. Jumping straight from the tragic deaths of civilian sailors to, like, celebrating aerospace engineering feels incredibly jarring. How do these actually connect for the average listener?
It's a completely fair question, and the connection lies in the concept of sovereignty and leverage.
Okay, how so?
Well, the tragic deaths in Odessa and the rising dangers in the Middle East expose a brutal reality. India is deeply reliant on and vulnerable to global supply chains and conflicts it cannot control. I mean, you cannot issue a diplomatic protest to an incoming anti-ship missile.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Right. If a nation relies entirely on foreign powers for its critical defense technologies, its foreign policy will always be compromised. That is why the announcement from Panini and India Private Limited is so structurally important.
The new engine?
Yes. They just unveiled the Yantur 4.5 kilonewton turbofan. It is India's first entirely privately developed indigenous engine for missiles and future combat aircraft.
And 4.5 kilonewtons, just to clarify the physics of that for a second, is the measure of thrust. It's the exact power class needed to propel cruise missiles over long distances.
Precisely. It is specifically designed for the new SVA ATL-1 stealthy land attack.
Suffering from dry, tired, irritated eyes? Don't let dry eyes win. Use Systane Pro. It hydrates, restores, and protects dry eyes for up to 12 hours. Systane Pro. Triple action dry eye relief.
Cruise missile.
And that one has AI-driven mission planning, right?
Yes, meaning the missile can autonomously alter its flight path to avoid radar. By developing this engine domestically, India achieves what defense analysts call sovereign propulsion capability.
So it's using its own internal engineering leverage to insulate its borders and its global interests from external supply chain blackmail.
Exactly.
Leverage. That is the core mechanism here. Whether you are a nation facing global war, a market facing volatility, or an organism facing environmental collapse, survival depends entirely on how you leverage what you have.
That's a great transition. Let's look at how this plays out in the financial ecosystem of Gift City right now.
The financial engineering here is just fascinating. HSBC in Gift City is currently offering non-resident Indians an aggressive strategy leveraging their FCNRB. That's foreign currency, non-resident deposits.
Okay, I need you to break down the actual math on this because when I read the source, it sounded wild. How exactly does someone get a 45% return on a standard deposit?
It is all about the spread. So let's say an investor puts down $10,000 as a base deposit. The bank then allows them to borrow 19 times that amount, so $190,000 at a very cheap borrowing rate.
And that rate is usually pegged to SOFR,
Right.
the Secured Overnight Financing Rate.
Exactly. So now they have their 10 grand plus the 190 grand they just borrowed. $200,000 total.
Okay, tracking so far.
They take that massive pool of borrowed capital and deposit it back into a high-yielding fixed deposit. Let's say the fixed deposit pays 5%, and their cost to borrow that huge loan is only 4%.
Ah, so they are pocketing that 1% difference.
Right. But because they are doing it on $200,000, the actual cash profit is huge compared to their original $10,000 risk. That amplification is how they can hit up to a 45% return.
But wait, if they are borrowing at a rate pegged to SOFR, which is a floating global rate, aren't they incredibly exposed?
Oh, massively. That is the catch. It carries extreme rollover risk.
What happens if rates change?
If global central banks panic and those cheap SOFR borrowing rates suddenly spike above the 5% yield of their fixed deposit, the spread goes negative. And because they are leveraged 19-to-1, their losses are amplified 19 times.
Wow. So they could wipe out their entire initial capital in a matter of weeks.
Yep. It is the ultimate high-wire active adaptation. You take a small asset and you hyper-leverage it to thrive in a specific environment.
And if we look at the public health sector, India is deploying a massive biological adaptation tool right now. The Drug Controller General of India just approved Takeda's Qdenga vaccine.
This is a monumental shift for public health, honestly. It is the very first dengue vaccine approved in India for a massive demographic, ages 4 all the way to 60.
And it boasts an 80.2% efficacy rate.
But the truly revolutionary part of the Qdenga vaccine is that it requires absolutely no pre-screening, right?
Yeah, that's huge.
Can you explain why that was such a hurdle before? I know dengue is weird.
It is incredibly tricky because it has 4 different versions, known as serotypes. Historically, if you got infected with one serotype, you developed immunity to it.
Okay, so far so good.
But if you later got infected by a different serotype, your existing antibodies would actually help the new virus replicate faster.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a deadly phenomenon called antibody-dependent enhancement.
Which meant older vaccines were incredibly dangerous if given to someone who had never had dengue before. You had to run blood tests on every single patient before vaccinating them, which is, logistically impossible in a country that carries 1/3 of the global dengue burden.
Exactly. But Qdenga protects against all 4 serotypes simultaneously, safely bypassing the need for pre-screening entirely.
So it's a biological tool that perfectly adapts to the chaotic, high-burden reality of India's public health system.
It is. But, the absolute masterclass in biological adaptation, the ultimate example of leveraging existing systems to survive a shock, comes from a University of Arkansas study on yeast cells.
Yes. This research is brilliant because it addresses a fundamental biological paradox.
Right. The scientists were studying how yeast cells survive sudden, extreme heat shocks. When the temperature spikes, the cellular environment becomes toxic.
And to survive, the cell desperately needs entirely new types of protective proteins. But synthesizing new proteins from scratch, reading the DNA, transcribing the RNA, building the amino acid chains, that takes far too long.
The cell would literally boil to death before the new proteins are ready.
Right. So how does it survive?
It uses a rapid-fire chemical process called acetylation. Instead of building new proteins from the ground up, the yeast cell rapidly modifies the proteins it already has.
Wow, it just changes them.
In business, the best days are when priorities stay on track. The Hartford helps midsize and large companies manage key exposures with insurance and proactive risk solutions, so focus can stay where it belongs. Visit thehartford.com/risk mitigation to learn more.
Yeah, it takes a tiny chemical tag, an acetyl group, and slaps it onto its existing proteins. This instantly changes their shape and function.
That's incredible.
The cell shuts down non-essential functions and instantly reprograms its existing molecular machinery to handle the heat stress.
Wait, think about the parallel here. The yeast cells are executing the exact same underlying logic as the NRI investors in Gift City, or the engineers building the Yontour engine.
They really are.
None of them are starting from scratch. That would take too long or cost too much. They are taking the assets they already possess, whether that's a small financial deposit, a domestic manufacturing base, or existing cellular proteins, and they are leveraging and rapidly reprogramming them to survive a sudden, massive change in that environment.
It is a universal law of complex systems. Whether you're looking at financial capital, defense infrastructure, or cellular biology, survival in high-stress, rapidly changing environments requires the efficient repurposing of existing assets, not waiting for perfect new ones to be built.
So, we are surrounded by systemic stress. We have the political pressure cookers in Delhi, the jammed parliaments, the lethal global supply chains, the financial rollover risks, the environmental heat shocks.
It's a lot of noise.
It is. How does an individual human mind actually maintain focus and execute amidst all of this literal and figurative noise?
Well, for that, we can look to a masterclass in psychological adaptation from the world of sports.
Oh, Rohit Sharma.
Exactly. He just hit his 34th ODI century, scoring a spectacular 138 off 110 balls against England at Lord's.
And the context of that century is everything. He walked out onto that pitch under an absolute mountain of criticism.
Yeah, he had been suffering through a prolonged lean patch, averaging just over 30 across his last 8 innings.
The pressure on him from the media, the fans, the former players, I mean, the noise was deafening. But after he scored the century, when a reporter asked him how he dealt with all that crushing criticism, he just smiled, shrugged, and said, quote, "If there's no noise, there's no fun."
It is a profound insight into elite execution. Rohit's mindset is the ultimate takeaway for navigating the complexities we've unpacked today.
How so?
Whether you are a yeast cell frantically adapting to a heat shock, a nation building cruise missile engines to insulate against global war, or a citizen watching domestic political turmoil, success requires an unwavering focus on execution.
You can't just wait for things to quiet down.
Right. You cannot wait for the environment to become calm. The noise, the criticism, the stress, the geopolitical pressure isn't an anomaly that needs to be cleared away. It is simply part of the atmosphere you have to operate in.
If there's no noise, there's no fun.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Well, what a journey today has been.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We have traversed an incredible landscape of systemic pressure and adaptation. We've gone from the tear gas and barricades of the CJP protests in Delhi to the complex medical and legal battles in the wards of Safdarjung.
We explored how a nation demands forensic transparency from both its sacred temples and its corporate giants, and how it is forced to engineer its own sovereignty against the tragic backdrop of the shipping lanes in Odessa. We decoded the high-stakes mathematics of financial leverage in Gift City, and we marveled at the microscopic resilience of yeast cells.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought, tying it back to those incredible yeast cells.
Okay, let's hear it.
We saw how they survive extreme, sudden heat, not by attempting to build entirely new proteins from scratch, but by rapidly reprogramming the molecular machinery they already possess.
Because it's faster, it's more efficient, and it leverages what is already there.
Exactly. So if biological systems, which have had millions of years of evolution to figure this out, survive their most severe crises by repurposing what they already have, might our human institutions need to learn the exact same lesson?
That's an interesting point.
Right now, our systems are facing intense public pressure, legislative gridlock, and street protests. Instead of constantly demanding entirely new laws or waiting for entirely new leaders to miraculously save us, maybe the secret to surviving our current societal heat shock isn't to burn the system down.
So what is the secret?
Maybe the secret is finding better, faster ways to chemically reprogram and leverage the democratic and institutional machinery we already have.
Wow. That is an incredibly powerful framework to view the news through. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking for the hidden wiring that connects the noise, and we'll see you next time.
Some personality quirks are really funny. Like, I talk to my left foot more than I talk to my right. You know what's not funny and not a personality quirk? OCD. Although the term OCD is widely recognized, it's misunderstood by most people. It doesn't mean being tidy or clean. It's having obsessive fears, thoughts, and urges. You question your character, you question your safety. That's OCD. Breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to nocd.com to learn more.